Have you ever found yourself in an epic showdown against someone whose life mission was enforcing petty rules down to the last blade of grass? Well, let me introduce you to Jake Anderson, whose peaceful life in Willow Creek Estates took a wild turn thanks to Susan, the notorious queen of the neighborhood HOA. Trust me, this story is unforgettable. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Jake Anderson had seen some crazy things in his life, but watching a middle-aged woman in a power suit sip coffee from a mug that literally said HOA Queen while her rusted minivan sat parked in his driveway was a new level of absurdity. He stood there, hands on his hips, staring at the woman who had made it her life's mission to torment him since the day he moved in. Susan, the self-appointed ruler of the neighborhood, gave him a smug smile, took another sip, and casually scrolled through her phone like she hadn't just hijacked his property. "Susan, you're blocking my driveway," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "No, I'm teaching you a lesson," she replied, not even bothering to look up. Jake took a deep breath. He had dealt with stubborn clients, overzealous bosses, and even the occasional rogue raccoon in his garage. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the level of petty he was dealing with now. He had been in the neighborhood for exactly 3 months, and in that short time, Susan had fined him for having his garbage can out 3 minutes too early, accused his car being an unapproved shade of blue, and once, in a moment that still made his blood boil, called the HOA board on him because his grass was 0.2 inches too tall. But this was something else. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Susan, move your car." She sighed dramatically, finally lowering her phone. "Jake, honey, I run the HOA. You should have read the fine print. This driveway, technically, it's part of the community's easement zone, which means I can park here if necessary." He blinked. "Necessary for what?" "For maintaining order," she said matter-of-factly. Jake took another deep breath and counted to 10, then to 20, then to 50, because he was dangerously close to throwing her coffee into the bushes. "If you don't move your car, I'm calling the police." Susan gave him a look of exaggerated pity. "Oh, sweetie, go ahead. My husband's a lawyer. Let's see how that works out for you." That did it. He pulled out his phone, dialed a non-emergency police number, and gave the dispatcher a brief explanation of the situation. To his complete lack of surprise, when the officer showed up, Susan turned on the crocodile tears and spun a story so ridiculous that even Jake had to admire her creativity. "He's harassing me," she sniffled. "I felt so unsafe. I had no choice but to park here. I was shaking." The officer, looking entirely uninterested, glanced between them. "Ma'am, do you have any actual proof of a threat?" Susan gasped, as if deeply offended. "He looked at me aggressively." Jake ran a hand down his face. "She's blocking my driveway." The officer sighed, obviously wishing he had chosen a different career path. "Sir, this is a civil matter. Take it up with the HOA." Susan smirked. "Thank you, officer. I knew you'd understand." Jake watched the officer leave, then turned back to her. "You're really going to do this?" She tilted her head. "Oh, honey, I already did." That night, Jake sat in his home office, staring at his laptop screen, trying to figure out what kind of medieval curse had landed him in this situation. He could fight her through the HOA, but that could take months. He could try towing her car, but Susan had friends on the board, and that would just escalate things further. He needed something big, something undeniable, something that would take the entire game board and flip it over. And then, at exactly 2:37 a.m., he found it, the loophole. He scrolled through the county zoning laws, rubbing his temples as he read through paragraph after paragraph of legal jargon. And then there was a single line that changed everything. Private residential driveways may be repurposed as personal helipads upon obtaining appropriate permits, at which point they will be considered aviation property and subject to FAA regulations rather than local HOA ordinances. Jake leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. Then, very slowly, a grin stretched across his face. Susan wanted to play legal warfare? Fine, he'd play. The next morning, Jake was up at sunrise, standing in line at the local zoning office with a fresh cup of coffee and the kind of grin that made people nervous. By noon, he had the application paperwork filled out, notarized, and officially submitted. Within 48 hours, an inspector came to survey the property. And by the end of the week, it was official. His driveway was no longer a driveway. It was a legally registered, FAA-compliant private helipad. Jake waited until the official paperwork arrived in the mail before making his next move. He walked outside, glanced at Susan's car still smugly parked in his driveway, and then carefully, methodically, started laying out the new markings. Bright yellow paint, large block letters, the whole deal. When Susan finally came outside to investigate, her jaw nearly hit the floor. "What are you doing?" she screeched. Jake didn't even look up. "Oh, just repainted my helipad." Her eye twitched. "Your what?" "My helipad." He straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You see, I found a fun little loophole in the county's zoning laws. My driveway isn't a driveway anymore. It's FAA-regulated aviation property." Susan blinked once, twice. Then she let out a shrill laugh. "This is a joke." "Nope." He pulled the official paperwork from his pocket and handed it to her. "It's legally binding." She scanned the document, her face slowly turning redder with every line. This isn't possible," she whispered. "Oh, it is," he said cheerfully. Susan's hand shook. "You can't just—" "Oh, but I did," he interrupted. "And here's the fun part, Susan. HOA rules, they don't apply to aviation zones." For the first time since he had moved in, Susan looked genuinely speechless. Then, in an act of sheer desperation, she did the most Susan thing possible. She grabbed a bucket of water for her porch and dumped it all over his fresh helipad markings. Jake stared at the now smeared paint, then slowly looked up at her. "You just destroyed federal aviation markings." Susan paled. "That's not—" Jake pulled out his phone and held up the screen. The security camera feed showed everything crystal clear. Susan let out a choked laugh, shaking her head. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I absolutely would," he said, grinning. "And I'm thinking maybe it's time I make a phone call." For the first time since he had moved in, Jake saw something incredible. Susan was terrified. And that's the epic tale of how Jake Anderson defeated the mighty HOA queen of Willow Creek Estates, one helicopter landing at a time. Remember, sometimes the best response to petty tyranny is a loophole, and maybe your own personal helipad. Until next time, choose your battles wisely, and always keep an eye on the fine print.